Ecclesiastes 4 through 16. Then I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and a striving after wind. Again, I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother. Yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a striving after wind.
The words that we just heard continue on the theme in the book of Ecclesiastes at this point of observation. Observation. Current section, the preacher, Solomon, is primarily interested in making all kinds of observations about the world under the sun, as he calls it. It's the world of vapor, transience, futility. Though in time, wisdom is going to teach us and does teach us what to do and how to act, Solomon is not primarily interested in this at this point in telling us what we should do, how we should act. Again and again, he's reflecting, he's making observations. He's bringing us to think about and feel the futility of this world. And the text, I think, verifies this in a striking way. So, kids, I know there's some agape kids, but kids who are in other schools and homeschooled. Okay, so you've learned probably, I think a good amount of you have, the 4 different kinds of sentences, right? Okay, so I want to test you real quick. And anyone who knows this, any of the kids, just shout it out, okay? A declarative sentence does what? There it is. They had a song for this that I just heard this past week. It makes a statement, okay? There's 4, but I just want to ask one other one. What does an imperative sentence do? Gives a command, right? Okay. So a declarative makes a statement. This grammar, it matters. I'm going somewhere with this in Ecclesiastes. Declarative just makes a statement. It's an observation, something like that. Imperative is a command, gives a command. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Things like that, okay? Strictly speaking, there is not a single command to the audience in the first 6 chapters of Ecclesiastes. I think that's significant. Except next week's passage, chapter 5, 1 through 7, there's some commands there. And there's a couple places that have this reflection with kind of a sense of appeal, like, I saw that there is nothing better for a man that he should rejoice in his work. But in those first 6 chapters, generally, he's not commanding. He's not giving exhortation per se. He's observing. He's reflecting on this world under the sun. Why do I bring that up? What should we learn from that? I think one important lesson is that wisdom, this is within wisdom, right? Wisdom has an order to it. Observation comes before exhortation, generally speaking. The modern mind is obsessed with utility. What's the use of it? What's the benefit of it to me? How does this benefit us? But the ancient mind, better, I think you could probably say the biblical mind, first asks not what's the benefit or what's the use of it, but what is true? What is reality? And then from that place, it carries all kinds of benefits from that storehouse out to bless the world. So there's an order, get what I'm saying, to wisdom. That we make observation, we take in what is true of reality first, we reflect, like Solomon is doing, and then we apply. We make exhortations from there. We must apply. We must exhort. And it's not always going to be this neat formula, equal parts, back and forth. But why is it so important to understand, to observe first, before you just launch out into exhortations or application? Because drawing applications before you rightly understand, rightly observe, is kind of like jumping on a train before you know where it's going. Just jump on. Get a ticket somewhere, get on that train. Trouble is, it might work out, it might not. You might get to the destination that you were planning on, but you're probably, when it's too late, you're going to realize that you made a fool out of yourself by not thinking about the kind of train that you should have gotten on first and just going with it. It's an analogy. We make observation first. From that we draw application, exhortation. Okay? Proverbs 18:13, remember, it says, if one gives an answer, literally a word, before he hears, it is his folly and shame. So with that, we come again, sit at the feet of Solomon to hear his wisdom, Spirit-inspired wisdom, and hear his observations of the world. And he has 3 of them that we're going to focus on this morning. And these are indicated by the phrase that you see in the Bible, I saw. I saw, I'm observing, okay? And these 3 observations are the futility of envy, the futility of loneliness, and the futility of honor or fame. Envy, loneliness, fame, or honor. So first, the futility of envy. Verses 4 through 6, just verse 4. Read along with me. And I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity, striving after wind. So this verse is a bit difficult, admittedly, in the original. Could technically be taken 2 main ways. One is that skill and work produces envy. So you're skillful in your work and it produces envy in other people. Or it could be taken in the sense that skill in work is done from the motivation of envy. So one, you're doing skillful work and toil, and people look on it and they envy it. The other would be that you're doing skillful work and toil out of the motivation of envy. Okay? Those 2 are options if we look at this verse, but I believe the second makes the most sense out of the context. So as the ESV has it, that people toil and have skill in their work out of a motivation of envy. And almost every major English translation interprets it that way. So then this observation that Solomon is making is about faulty motivations behind human ambition. So in the context, envy refers to a competitive spirit, rivalry. It causes people to work hard, even to pursue mastery of their skill. Think of all kinds of different things. And they do this so that they can hold a place of prominence. Envy moves people to chase 80-hour work weeks. Envy animates political campaigns. Envy shows up at piano recitals, athletic events, business meetings, homeschool co-ops. He's saying it's everywhere. Toil, work and skill, all of it. Envy, there's envy in all of it. I don't think what we should take this to mean is that Solomon is saying literally in every single instance of anything that is made or any work that is done ever, all of it stems from a motivation of envy. One of the reasons for that is because the saints in the New Testament are told to put away envy. By the Holy Spirit, we are capable of doing that. And you see this in the saints of the Old Testament as well. Many of them were able to rise above the carnality of just envy and worldly ambition in this way. But it was envy that motivated the ancients to burn bricks thoroughly and build the Tower of Babel. They wanted to make a name for themselves, set themselves apart among all the other people on the earth, right? Probably most striking is Paul when he says that it was out of envy that his contemporaries were preaching when he was in prison. So, again, like last week, justice in the place of righteousness, you can have envy in the place of the pulpit. Right here. Nowhere safe from this motivation. It is in preaching, it's in schools, it's in your workplace, it is deep in the human heart. Envy. We adults can often look on children with contempt when we see their jealousy and rivalries and envy among themselves. Look at them, arguing over their toys, quarreling over who's the strongest or the fastest. We see a little boy boasting over another one because he has a fire truck and that little boy only has a handful of blocks. Ha. And we look at that and we're like, oh, what immaturity. Envy, jealousy. Look at these little kids with all their immaturity and envy. But are you so different? We might not race each other down the street, but do we run after places of prominence? Does it irk you when that other person gets the promotion, gets the opportunity? We might not boast over fire trucks. We have our own toys, our own treasures, our own cherished reputations. And the New Testament calls envy a work of the flesh. Galatians 5:21. Now, if you pair that with Solomon's statement here that all toil and skill and work is done out of a man's envy of his neighbor, you just realize that corruption's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's all over the place under the sun. Carnal mind with its motivations holds sway over all human enterprise. SpaceX rockets to Pulitzer Prize books. All is envy. All is futility. All is striving after wind. What does it amount to? What is all that toil and all that skill and work and all that moving out to these great things with envy? What does it amount to? You make an app that millions of people can use. You build a company that can send people to the moon. Congratulations. According to how Solomon is speaking, a society of vapor raises its glass to you, and then they blow away, and all that praise is gone. Now, you could take that, and you could say, okay, wow, ambition, skill and work, all of that stuff, it's ugly. I'm just going to stay away from that, and it's not going to work. I'm just going to avoid ambition, and then I'll be safe. Verse 5, very next verse. Solomon says, the fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Wow. So Solomon doesn't give any room for the objection. You see, look at all these little worker ants moving around, busy about their toil and their skill and their labor and all of that, and I'm just going to avoid all of that. No, he doesn't allow it. The other extreme is just as full of futility. The idea of eating your own flesh is admittedly a very graphic and vivid image, right? The idea, I think, is that someone is so lazy that they refuse to earn a living for the daily food that they need. And then at last, becoming so desperately hungry and yet still unwilling to work, they resort to the only meal that they have within reach, which is their own flesh. They just sit there in indolence, inactivity, apathy, eat their own flesh. Maybe you're not tempted to avoid work for a living, but I'll caution you to beware, in light of this, of the little moments of worthless hand-folding that eat away at your vitality. Charles Bridges, in his commentary on Ecclesiastes, says this, powerful little sentence. Trifling indulgences greatly enervate the soul. He means weakens the vitality of, drains the vitality of. Trifling indulgences greatly drain the vitality of the soul. Some of us are depressed and downcast, some of us, because we are folding our hands so much with trifles and indulging in trifles that are just zapping our spiritual vitality, shrinking our soul down, like you would feel if you stood before the Grand Canyon and you have this opportunity to take in this amazing sight right in front of you, and yet you kind of turn your back and you're playing Block Breaker on your phone while it's just right there. You go away from that, you feel plastic. You feel like your soul has shrunk in size. These things enervate, they weaken the vitality of the soul. So if you're stuck in that kind of hand-folding, call it what Solomon does. Call it foolishness. Call it foolishness. Confess it to God. Confess it to a close friend and go in a new direction. You can go in a new direction. Pursue things that will enlarge your soul. But after this, in verse 6, it seems like Solomon gives a kind of mediating position. Better, he says. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. So I think, in other words, the best place to be is working enough for what is needful, handful of quietness. And like chapter 3, verse 22, you're rejoicing in your work because it's your portion. It's the portion that God has given you. You neither toil endlessly because of envy, nor refrain from work because of idleness. That's the sweet spot, I think, that Solomon is putting forward. The kind of mediating position between these two, that he says, under the sun, this is the better place to be in. That's the first observation about envy. And we're feeling the futility of the world, hopefully, as Solomon is speaking about it, making these observations. The next is the futility of loneliness. This is in verses 7 through 12. Let's read the first couple of this passage. Look at it with me. He says, again, I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? And this also is vanity. It's an unhappy business. So we've got injustice from the last chapter, oppression, envy, idleness. Now he's talking about loneliness. How broad sweeping does Solomon speak about the evils and sorrows of this world? I think what he particularly has in view in this moment, in this observation, is the loneliness of selfish gain. We could call it the loneliness of selfish gain. Here's a person, as he's described, who works hard, keeps at his toil day after day, earns lots of money, and yet has no one to share it with. It's part of the futility. He's amassing money so much and has his eyes so fixed on this that he never stops to ask himself the question, what am I building up all of this wealth for? What am I toiling so hard for? Working my fingers to the bone. It's just, what does this amount to? His insatiable appetite for wealth robs him of the present joy of his work, and it robs him of any awareness of the future. He's just blinded, tunnel vision on his work. Jesus, I think, has this exact kind of person in mind in one of his parables in Luke 12. Read it for you. Jesus says, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. He said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" It's an exact paraphrase of Ecclesiastes. Whose will they be? Have you thought about that? This night your soul is required of you. Where's all your wealth that you've amassed? Where's it going to go? Selfish ambition. Paul says that this insatiable appetite for wealth in 1 Timothy 6 causes people to fall into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. So he's not saying that this is only spiritually deadly. That's true. But he's saying that it's senseless, which is what Ecclesiastes is getting at. It's senseless. It's foolish. This person never stops to ask himself why he's working so hard just so that his riches can fall into somebody else's hands. So I just encourage you to ask yourself this morning, ask yourself this question. Are you in an endless cycle of selfish ambition? Wherever you are. Are you working tirelessly because you have a craving for more? Is pursuing this, whatever it is, work, ambition, wealth, craving for more, and you're just stuck in this cycle, and you don't realize why you're so frustrated, why it's so unsatisfying, why it's so unfulfilling, even though you work so hard. Ask yourself, for what are you toiling so hard? For what are you doing all of this for? What about when God says, this night your soul is required of you? What will it all matter at that point? Paul says that through this craving, some have wandered from the faith. I'm speaking to a room full of Christians, I trust. And Paul says to Christians that through this craving of wealth and riches, some have wandered from the faith. You're in danger of that. Feel it as a Christian. We're in probably the wealthiest country in the world in all of history. You are in danger of the deceitfulness of riches. Jesus speaks about it all the time. Reflect on these things seriously. Consider them. Consider them with your spouse. Through this craving, some have wandered from the faith. But the opposite of this is not just an abstinence, not just a putting it away, but positively, Hebrews 13:5, keep your life free from love of money and be content with what you have, because he has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. That's the ground for severing this insatiable craving for wealth. I will never leave you or forsake you. And Solomon continues on this theme, think of loneliness, and it's got a glimmer of light to it at this point. So this is verses 9 through 12. He says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not easily broken. So in contrast with passage before, the lonely miser, we have Solomon speaking of the goodness of companionship. Simple words, two is better than one. The goodness, the blessedness of companionship. Friendship is a precious gift. Some of you know this very well. Some of you long for this very much. It's a precious gift. As the old adage goes, friends double our joys and divide our sorrows. Doing some great project by yourself can be a drudgery, but having a friend join in the work will not only make it more efficient, but more enjoyable. A friend can lift you up when you fall down, comfort you when your cares are many, even bring physical protection in danger, right? Some of the things that Solomon is going through. But think for a second on the negative Solomon puts forward in those verses. He says, "Woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up." That's a pretty hard fall, right? And just think about it for a second. When's the last time that you fell and you could not get up on your own? You needed somebody else to help you up. This isn't like tripping over a curb. This is a debilitating fall. Something that you, if you're not helped, are just going to lie there without somebody outside of you coming along to your aid. If you don't have anyone to help you in a situation like that, fallen, and you're just left there, woe is a very fitting word, right? Woe to him who does not have any help, no one to pick him up when he falls. And let's just carry this out. Certainly, there are physical falls, but there are many falls where we need help from a friend to lift us up. Falling into financial ruin, falling into chronic illness, falling into family trouble, falling into sin, falling into despair or depression, grievous fall you can't get up from. Two is better than one. Solomon is holding out the goodness of companionship and friendship, of somebody, another person outside of yourself to pick you up when you fall. I think this is illustrated powerfully in the life of John Newton, his relationship with William Cooper. And some of us here were at this radio last night where it was talking about the life of John Newton and William Cooper and some of the hymns that they put together. It was beautiful. One of the things that struck me, though, was Newton's relationship, his friendship with Cooper, and especially since I had this text on my mind. So in 1767, Newton and Cooper became friends, and just the short version of it is that the first 6 years they enjoyed were bright together, sweet friendship. They were together all the time. But the last 27 years of William Cooper's life, till he died in 1800, he suffered in a state of intense darkness and depression, just unrelenting. Little brief moments of hope, but it was just this pressing weight upon him. And Newton stuck with him all the way through it. Some of you know Cooper was in such despair that he tried to end his life multiple times. He tried. On the 12th year of their friendship, John Newton wrote this: "The first 6 years I passed in daily admiring and aiming to imitate him," that is Cooper. "During the second 6, I walked pensively with him in the valley of the shadow of death." And then Cooper later reflected on his friendship lifelong friendship with Newton, and he said this, and what a statement, what a commendation to have a friend say to you. A more sincere or more affectionate friend no man ever had. Cooper couldn't offer anything to Newton, really, in this dejected, despairing state for 27 years. And by the grace of God, John Newton was upheld to lift this brother up again and again and not forsake him. It's beautiful. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. So brothers and sisters, two are better than one. If they fall, one will lift up his fellow. Some of you know how hard it is and how debilitating it can be when you fall and there is no one there to pick you up. Some of you have been there. So let's not just think about the goodness from this passage, the goodness of having friends, the goodness of having companionship, which it is, but let's also think about being a friend. Don't just look out like the lawyer says of Jesus, right? Like, who's my neighbor? You remember how Jesus ends it? He says, this man proved to be a neighbor to the Samaritan who had fallen. So be the kind of friend like Newton who suffers long, who goes the long haul, who doesn't give up easily through all of the difficulties, all of the futility, all of the despair, when this person is not doing anything for you. The world says they're toxic. Get them out of your life. They're not adding to you at all. Not so for followers of Christ, beloved. Not so for us. Finally, the futility of fame. Verses 13 through 16. Better, Solomon says, was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been poor. So the final observation, I think, in this section is primarily referring to the futility and transience of honor, the fleeting nature of fame. It begins with a proverb in verse 13. But the observation doesn't fully land until verse 15 when Solomon says, I saw. It's, I think, our textual clue. The proverb's simple, but I think it's very telling of the biblical priorities of wisdom. So, the first person in the little sentence proverb is the youth. And he has two undignified qualities about him. One, negatively, is that he is poor, and the second is that he is young. Those are negative things. He's poor and he's young. He's got one positive thing going for him. He's wise. Then comes the other. Positively, he is a king and he is old. For most of us, that second one doesn't sound positive. Like, old, how is that a good thing? We need to get our minds out of our kind of modern Western mindset, worldview, to recognize that according to the scriptures, being old is a place of honor. As my wife sometimes reminds me, gray hair is a crown of glory. A little bit of that. Being old is to be held in a position, in a place of honor. So, the youth, he's young, he's poor, but he's wise, and then you have this king. He's a king. Highest place you could be in society. And he's old. He has this respect about him, but he's a fool. He's a fool. In this case, the man in verse 13, he's both gray-haired and kingly. But he's a fool for this chief reason, it says, because he no longer knew how to take advice. You see that? He no longer knew how to take advice. This is not referring to a momentary lapse in judgment, but a settled obstinance that probably developed over years of pride and hard-heartedness. People coming to him and saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but this does not sound like the wisest course of action, King. And over time, in all of his authority and rule, he becomes self-sufficient and he stops listening to advice. And the Bible, Solomon says, you're a fool. I don't care if you're a king. You're a fool. Proverbs 12:25. There's a lot that Scripture has to say about this. Just one passage. Proverbs 12:25. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. So even though the king would normally be honored far above the youth, the honor of wisdom in this case outweighs the status of the throne. So then you've got this young man, poor, but he's wise, and he comes all the way to the throne, from prison to the throne is what the passage says. And we might think, in light of that, his honor will be enduring because he came from such a place of humility. And he knows how to take advice because he came from humble beginnings. He's not like the foolish king who came before him. And then, I think, Solomon's observation falls, ratcheting up the sense of futility of all the honor and fame. Verse 15, I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all whom he led, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and is striving after wind. All this rags to riches story of this wise, poor youth, all of that story amounts to futility in the end, even though he rises to such a place of honor and fame. It's grasping the wind. Feel it, the transience of worldly honor. It's vapor, it's futility, it's wind. If you think your place of honor, wherever it is right now, feels disappointing only because you haven't risen high enough in the world yet, then this is a clear word and warning to you. This well-respected king who came from a place of great humility, who led an endless sea of people, soon forgotten. Nobody rejoiced in him. It's like a dusty trophy sitting in the corner of a basement. No one rejoiced in him anymore. Onward to the next king, the next generation, just the next spin cycle of human praise. Vanity. For me, this calls to mind Percy Shelley's famous poem, Ozymandias. Maybe some of you have heard this poem before. Looks like Titus has heard this poem. Powerful, vivid poem. It's about a traveler who comes across this imposing monument of a once great Egyptian king. There he stands before the monument, short poem, and right towards the end of the poem, it says this. On the pedestal, these words appear. So he's looking at the pedestal of this great statue. On the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. That's what worldly honor amounts to in the end. Vivid picture of it. A colossal wreck, boundless and bare. No one rejoicing in it. Nothing but a big broken monument with an immeasurable audience of sand. Feel the futility of it. The futility of ambition and envy. The futility of loneliness and selfish gain. The futility of the transience, fleeting nature of worldly honor under the sun. And as we feel it, where do we land? I hope one thing is that this sobers us. It gives us a check on our view of reality in this world and what we are pursuing and what our ambitions are. Sobers us. But is this where we land ultimately? Nothing but barren, endless futility? Just a wasteland? We can resolutely say no. That is not where we land as Christians. Because of the fullness of biblical revelation, we understand that this futility that we are feeling and that this passage is describing is not inherent to God's creation, because he called it very good. And this world that we are feeling, that Solomon is describing, has come about because of our sin and rebellion, and it was subjected to futility. Romans 8:20 through 21. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. I think a good way of understanding Ecclesiastes as a whole is that you read that passage in Romans 8:20, that the creation was subjected to futility. And you see that word futility, light blue and underlined, and you click on that hyperlink, and it opens up the book of Ecclesiastes. The world subjected to futility under the sun, and you open up that hyperlink, and you go right to the book of Ecclesiastes to sit and feel it for a while. That one sentence, though, if we keep going, does not only say that the world was subjected to futility, but it was subjected to futility in hope. The hope of a world, according to that passage, that is set free from corruption. In other words, no more envy polluting our ambitions. Can you imagine how ubiquitous envy is right now? To be in a world where righteousness dwells in such a degree that there is zero rivalry, zero envy. Ambition, yes, godly ambition, but rivalry, it's gone. Or a world set free from loneliness, as the passage puts forward, being part of a forever family with God, the children of God. Or again, as this passage sets forth, being set free from the transience of worldly honor, obtaining the glory of the children of God, glory that is imperishable and unfading, not like that colossal wreck out in the barren wasteland. In the ground for all of this great freedom from corruption and loneliness and transience is the greatest rags to riches story ever told, if we could call it that. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. That's the story. Though rich in holiness, in the perfect, incorruptible life of the Godhead, Jesus Christ subjected himself to the world that was subjected to futility. He came from heaven to earth to be born in the likeness of men and to take on the form of a slave. And in the confinement, the prison of this futile flesh, he laid down his life to restore the image of God in us. And he rose again so that through faith in his name, we might have the right to be called the children of God and escape the futility that is in this world as he makes all things new. Come and believe it. Come and receive it. Come, yes, to feel the transience and futility of this world, and let it sober you Let it bring you, if you're in that rat race, let it bring you to despair of it. But don't stay there. Let it bring you to the one who entered into this world of futility, to undo it, to bring us through it, to remake it, and to fill us with power by the Holy Spirit while we are yet under the sun, to put away envy, to put away selfish gain, and to put away the lust of worldly power. It is possible for a Christian to walk in the power of the Holy Spirit and walk in this kind of holiness, all until we attain the full possession of the true riches that Christ has won for us.